Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns that they're going to be selling in their upcoming April of 2018 premiere auction. Today, we're taking a look at a carbine that a lot of people would associate with the Civil War, but which actually substantially predates the Civil War. In fact, if you were going to associate this with any conflict in particular, it would be the Mexican-American War of 1846. And this is a Jenks Navy carbine. And it's actually a really elegant, slick little carbine, quite impressive. The design was patented by William Jenks of South Carolina in 1838, and the very first guns manufactured for military trials in 1839 were actually flintlocks. Now, that didn't last very long. They pretty quickly changed this to a percussion lock system, and the Navy ran some trials in 1841 and came to the conclusion that they really liked the thing. In fact, apparently, the trials carbine, they put 14,813 rounds through before it actually had a mechanical failure, and that was the percussion nipple breaking, apparently, at that point. Well, that's a really quite durable gun, and the Navy was quite enthusiastic and proceeded to order many thousands of them. In fact, specifically, the Navy ordered 1,000 long rifles, and then about 4,250 of the carbines, and they bought these through the Ames company of Springfield, Massachusetts. Ultimately, they would order another 1,000 guns, which were modified to use the Maynard tape primer system. They ordered those from Ames, but Ames actually sold the contract to the Remington company, which was interested in putting these into production. So that last 1,000 gun order was actually manufactured by Remington, which makes for an interesting variant. One of these days I'll get my hands on one of those and show it to you. But going back a little bit, the Army, after seeing the Navy's success, the Army decided to go ahead and try these out, and the Army trials went pretty dramatically poorly. It sounds like there was some ammunition misunderstanding, and they may have been using these with the powder charge from a Hall rifle, which was substantially larger than this was designed for. I haven't found the exact details of that Army trial, but it didn't go well. The Army didn't adopt or purchase any of these, and apparently that failure at the Army trials really is what prevented this system from ever attaining a whole lot of commercial success either. So the Jenks guns were pretty much Navy issue guns, and that's about it. Now, like I said, they have a very slick and elegant system, and they also have this colloquial name of the mule ear carbine because they have a hammer on the side. So let's take a closer look at that. We have a few little tiny markings here on the lock plate. W.M. William Jenks, the guy who patented the system. N.P. Ames of Springfield, Massachusetts was the manufacturer. Up here on the top of the barrel, we have some more markings. We have William Jenks again. We have USN because this is a United States Navy property gun, and then the inspector who actually accepted it for the Navy, his initials were RC, and that was Rufus Chandler. There were 4 different inspectors who were involved in the approval of these guns. And then 1846, P is just, by the way, a proof mark on there. 1846 is the date that this one was actually acquired or manufactured. So this is later in the production series. It really is remarkable just how svelte and elegant this whole system is, with, I suppose, a slight exception for the hammer on the side, but even that isn't terribly in the way. They have a brass trigger guard, kind of neat. They often did brass furniture or brass accoutrements on Navy guns because they were less susceptible to corrosion and rust from salt water. However, there are some parts, like the receiver, the barrel, and the lock plate, that need to have the strength of steel, and you can't really make those out of brass. So, moving on to how this actually works, the hammer functions like a normal hammer. It just comes in from the side instead of the top. This was a system that had seen some popularity in sporting rifles, I guess especially in New England, and there was actually some reason for it. Consider that as a right-hand shooter, your face is going to be over on this side of the gun, on the opposite side from the percussion cap. And so when you actually fire, you do risk bits of percussion cap flying out. And when the hammer is on the top of the action, in theory, some of that could come back and actually hit the shooter in the face. It's not exactly a serious problem, but it is something sort of potential. With a side hammer design, that is impossible because the shooter's face is on the exact opposite side of the gun. Now, it obviously wasn't that big of an issue because this is the only side hammer gun that the US military ever adopted, but it's not just a random choice. There was some rationale for it. Now, the more substantial part is this breech lever right here. There is a hook on the left side for opening, so finger under there, and lift this whole thing up, and what you have is a bolt right here with a long lever that extends it into the barrel and back out. Now, when these guns were first manufactured, this oval opening was actually just a round hole here at the front. And what you would do is put a round ball in and then tilt the gun forward a bit and have it roll down into the chamber. And then you would pour in a powder charge from your powder flask. And then you would close this lever, and the bolt face here would push the powder up against the projectile, seat it all firmly in the chamber. And then with the lever all the way down, you can then fully cock the hammer, fire the gun. The top of this tail here on this handle is going to just be a little extra safety to make sure that this doesn't open, but pushing backwards on that piston isn't going to really put any force on this in the upwards direction. So it's not going to open under the pressure of firing. You do get a little bit of gas leakage from these. There isn't a specific gas sealing mechanism. However, they apparently had a pretty decent fit just out of the factory. And the shape of this breech lever means that whatever gas does come out tends to go down and forward this direction and doesn't come back to cause a problem for the shooter. Now, in the lead up to the Civil War, at some point, most of these guns, the serious majority of these guns, were modified to extend this loading port into a larger oval. That was done so that they could use a linen cartridge. So, a package having the projectile and the powder all in one unit. That's a lot more convenient. It's easier to transport. You're not as likely to, mismeasure the powder or that sort of thing. But you can't really load that through just a plain round hole. So they extended that open. You have a little more space. You can load in a cartridge. And then the same thing then works. Now, apparently, it's not entirely clear to me if these were originally smoothbore or if they were manufactured as both smoothbore and rifled variants. Today, the vast majority of them you find are in fact rifled. They're 52 caliber, 6-groove rifled barrels. It is possible that they were originally smooth, and when they made this update to the loading port, they also rifled the barrels, or it might be that they had originally made a small number of smoothbore guns, but a lot of those were also converted. That element I just haven't been able to really clarify. I should also point out the sights. The rear sight is this little tiny sliver of a notch on the loading lever. And then the front sight is this brass blade integral to the front barrel band. There are no sling swivels on these guns. As Navy guns, they weren't something that were expected to be thrown over the shoulder and carried any substantial distance. There's one persistent misunderstanding about these guns, and that comes from the caliber. These are 52 caliber guns, whether smoothbore or rifled. They're all 52 caliber. However, you'll find a lot of sources referring to them as 54 caliber. And apparently that goes all the way back to a Navy publication at one point that alluded to these as being 54 caliber. And it seems that that came from, it came from the fact that these are breech loading guns. And because you're putting the projectile in the very back, you press it up tightly against the rifling, and that's all you have to do. And that allows you to use a slightly larger projectile than on a muzzle loader, where you have to actually engrave the rifling onto the projectile by hand and ram it all the way down the barrel. So a smoothbore muzzle loader is going to actually use a projectile that's a little bit smaller in size than a rifled breech loader. And apparently the Navy used the same, or thought they could use the same projectiles in a 54 caliber muzzle loading smoothbore that they used in the 52 caliber breech loading rifled guns. And so because they referred to this 54 caliber ammunition as interchangeable, that led some writers to assume that these guns were actually 54 caliber. So that's where that comes from. Now, you will also see reference to these in a couple of other configurations during the Civil War. And I wanted to do this a little separately from those because as a much earlier Navy production carbine, these really are distinct guns. So tomorrow we will check back in on one of the later Merrill pattern Civil War alterations on this system. If you'd like to have this particular one for your own collection, it is of course coming up for sale here. Take a look at the description text below. You'll find a link to Rock Island's catalog page for the gun. You can see their pictures, description, price estimate, everything you need, including a link where you can place a bid right through their website. Thanks for watching.